Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. I'm going to talk to you today about Jeffrey Epstein and the news that the client list of Jeffrey Epstein is not materialized, should we say. And this is causing quite a bit of controversy. I want to remind you of the timeline of Jeffrey Epstein and the idea that this could well affect a number of people going to the very top of the US government. Donald Trump. Could affect the British royal family, Prince Andrew. It could affect all sorts of people from Bill Clinton to X, Y, and Z, right? So this is potentially huge news and has been touted, the Epstein files have been touted by many, particularly in the kind of conspiracy theory, right-wing information spaces, as being the big thing. This is going to blow out the water some of these people, like, for example, Bill Clinton, and particularly looking at like kind of left-wing people from a right-wing point of view, saying, "Oh, okay, we need to get into to power. We need Trump to be elected so that these Epstein files can be thrown out into the public and everyone can know for sure exactly what's been going on, etc., etc." And then it's been a bit of a damp squib, and that itself causes all sorts of ramifications, or we can derive lots of conclusions from that. Now, the timeline of the scandal goes something like this. This is from the Associated Press. So, March 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida, began investigating Epstein after the family of a 14-year-old girl reports she was molested at his mansion. Multiple underage girls, many of them high school students, would later tell police that Epstein hired them to give sexual massages. In May 2006, Palm Beach police officials signed paperwork to charge Epstein with multiple counts of unlawful sex with a minor, but the county's top prosecutor, State Attorney Barry Krischer, takes the unusual step of sending the case to a grand jury. July 2006, Epstein is arrested after a grand jury indicts him on a single count of soliciting prostitution. The relatively minor charge draws almost immediate attention from critics, including Palm Beach police leaders, who assail Krischer publicly and accuse him of giving Epstein special treatment. The FBI begins an investigation. So straight away at this point in the narrative, there is something to be explained. That is, why was he only charged with a relatively minor infraction back then? 2007, federal prosecutors prepare an indictment against Epstein, but for a year, the money manager's lawyers engage in talks with the U.S. attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta, about a plea bargain that would allow Epstein to avoid a federal prosecution. Epstein's lawyers decry his accusers as unreliable witnesses. So this is another area of controversy with Alexander Acosta and a plea bargain. In June 2008, Epstein pleads guilty to state charges, one count of soliciting prostitution and one count of soliciting prostitution from someone under the age of 18. He is sentenced to 18 months in jail. Under a secret arrangement, the U.S. Attorney's Office agrees not to prosecute Epstein for federal crimes. Epstein serves most of his sentence in a work release program that allows him to leave jail during the day and go to his office and then return at night. So again, very soft punishment for Jeffrey Epstein for crimes that have been, that were much worse than what he was charged with, effectively. Now, July 2009 comes along. Epstein is released from jail for the next decade. Multiple women who say they are Epstein's victims wage a legal fight to get his federal non-prosecution agreement voided. And hold him and others liable for the abuse. One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Giuffre, says in her lawsuits that, starting when she was 17, Epstein and his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, set up sexual encounters with royalty, politicians, academicians, businessmen, and other rich and powerful men, including Britain's Prince Andrew. Of all of these men deny the allegations, of course. And in November 2018, the Miami Herald revisits the handling of Epstein's case in a series of stories focusing partly on the role of Acosta, who by this point is President Donald Trump's Labor Secretary, in arranging his unusual plea deal. The coverage renews public interest in the case. So part of the issue here might well be that the previous treatment, the previous soft treatment of Epstein could well be as a result of someone associated with Trump world. Okay, July the 6th, 2019, Epstein is arrested on federal sex trafficking charges after federal prosecutors in New York concluded that they weren't bound by the terms of the earlier non-prosecution deal. Days later, Acosta resigns as Labour Secretary amid public outrage over his role in the initial investigation. August the 10th in 2019, guards find Epstein dead in his cell at a federal jail in New York City. Investigators conclude he killed himself. This is another part of the controversy, and the conspiracy theories around this are legion. So the idea is that, how can someone commit suicide in a jail? Talk about there being a broken video camera that doesn't catch the stuff that it should do, and how convenient is that, and so on and so forth. July the 2nd, 2020, federal prosecutors in New York charged Ghislaine Maxwell with sex crimes, saying she helped recruit the underage girls that Epstein sexually abused and sometimes participated in the abuse herself. On December 30th, 2021, after a month-long trial, a jury convicts Maxwell of multiple charges, including sex trafficking, conspiracy and transportation of a minor for illegal sexual activity, and she is eventually sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now, that 20 years, you can imagine, is what Epstein at least would have been done for, and had he been found guilty of much more serious counts earlier on in this time frame, then he wouldn't have been able to do 10 years worth of extra illegal acts, so on and so forth. Okay, now at every stage in this there is just lots of controversy. It's worth noting a few other things. So JP Morgan and in fact Deutsche Bank reached settlements with Jeffrey Epstein victims. So JP Morgan pays $290 million to a range of the victims, and that's got to tell you something as well. The victims had accused a bank of enabling sex trafficking by the deceased financier when he was a client, and you've got that from Deutsche Bank as well, $75 million settlement previously with them. So there is an acceptance of culpability. There is quite a lot to be said, I guess, about the whole set of events. Given that these banks have said, "Yep, okay, there are big issues here. We're going to pay out quite a lot of money." Okay, let's then move on. So, Epstein's former employee, Maria Farmer, alleged that his residences had pinhole cameras recording every single thing the clients were doing. There were computer rooms bigger than houses collecting the information. This was obviously used to garner blackmail and hold leverage over these people. Quote, all of Epstein's residences had these mechanical rooms and tunnel systems. I know this because Epstein told me. These rooms were enormous, bigger than houses. I have no idea why anyone needs so many computers in one room. There were pinhole cameras to record everything on every estate. The cameras were ubiquitous. You couldn't see them unless they were pointed out to you, is a quote. I don't care who you are, says this source, Green Lives Matter. Whether you are liberal or conservative, we do not believe that Epstein was not blackmailing anyone and that Ghislaine went to jail for trafficking children to no one. So the issue is that she's gone to prison. Banks have been found liable, and yet it's just Epstein and Maxwell, that there's no other involvement in all these other people. What's going on with all these other people? Is it true that there were these cameras? Did he have a client list? And did that list implicate all sorts of very powerful people? And would that bring down the royal family or, big business and very famous people, including even Donald Trump, the president of the United States himself, right? And we're going to get onto that. Was this in order to get blackmail and to get leverage over people? It would seem that would be the case. Or the only other option is that he's just doing it because he gets the joy out of doing it. So that would be okay. It is an explanation. But the client list that appears to be evidence, like we know that there are lots of famous people who associate themselves very closely with Epstein and was seen publicly at these parties, including Prince Andrew, including Donald Trump. It seems that it's going to go a little bit further than just Maxwell and Epstein doing this for themselves, so on and so forth. Okay. Then we had Elon Musk coming out before the election and saying things like this.
I think part of why Kamala's getting so much support is that if Trump wins, that Epstein client list is going to become public.
Yes.
And some of those billionaires behind Kamala are terrified of that outcome.
Yeah. Do you think?
So this is very much what the right wing was saying. So Elon Musk there says, I think the reason why you get all these billionaires supporting Kamala Harris is because they don't want the Epstein client list to come out. And if it comes out, then their lives are going to be ruined. So they are all punning in to support Harris. And what you had is this framing of the whole thing was that Jeffrey Epstein had a client list that mainly involved people on the left. And people like Elon Musk would come along and say, we need Trump to get in so that this client list can be published and it blows so many people out the water and this is going to be really big. And then what you had is Trump getting in and things not looking like they were aligning with that worldview. And the problem is you had heaps of right-wing influencers from Don Bongino, who's now number 2, and Kash Patel, number 1 at the FBI. Number 1 and number 2 at the FBI were saying prior to the election, all of this, they were spouting all sorts of conspiracy theories. And some of these conspiracy theories might well have had some justification, right? And they were talking up the idea that they've got this, there is this client list and if they get in charge, they're going to expose it and so on and so forth. It really was a very, I think, significant component of the kind of MAGA information world. So Trump gets in and he appoints Pam Bondi as the Attorney General. And she claims she will release more Epstein documents, but they may be redacted for national security purposes. Now, this is when you start thinking something funky's going on here. Because if they talked up throwing these Epstein files out into the public domain, and this is going to be huge, and you got Elon Musk and even people like Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel talking about this, and then getting in and saying, oh, there could be some national security issues with publishing these documents. If those national security, if the documents included all the enemies of the Trump administration, then they would be publishing them straight away. If you had Bill Clinton and blah, 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 and blah, 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 all these people all over the documents and all over and featuring on this supposed client list, then you can bet your bottom dollar that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi would be throwing those files out there. But they would started to be far more cautious. And that makes you think that the people who were implicated in the Epstein files were people within the Trump world and the Trump administration. That then becomes a bit of a conflict of interest, or that then becomes a tension for these people where they were previously saying one thing and now feeling like they have to walk that back. The search for radical transparency isn't going so well inside the new Trump White House. MAGA world was perturbed last week when President Trump's new Attorney General Pam Bondi claimed to have finally shed light on the mysterious case of Jeffrey Epstein, but instead released a bunch of documents that had already been publicly available for years. So they released a bunch of documents, and they did this to these. And we'll come to this a bit later. It's called Phase 1 to these right-wing influencers. They didn't release them to news agencies and other serious entities. They released these to people like Joe Posobiec and other right-wing influencers, your Charlie Kirks of the world and whatnot. They released this stuff, and then it's all a bit of a damp squib because they've had to redact all sorts, and it turns out it's just exactly what was publicly available prior to that. So now Bondi is claiming that the reason she wasn't able to release more documents is because other government officials blocked them from being sent to her. Quote, late yesterday, I learned from a source that the FBI field office in New York was in possession of thousands of pages of documents related to the investigation and indictment of Epstein, she wrote in a recently published letter. Despite my own repeated requests, the FBI never disclosed the existence of the files. Bondi now claims that a source told her that there were thousands of pages pertaining to Epstein that remained in the Southern District of New York, the district where Epstein was being tried for sex trafficking when he died in 2019. Bondi has intimated that the FBI and the Southern District of New York withheld these documents from her when she requested the full Epstein dossier. She now says that with the help of a new MAGA FBI director, Kash Patel, a truckload of documents have been acquired from SDNY and that those documents will soon be made public. Okay, so right. So we can't release lots of stuff yet because we actually don't have it to look at and to synthesize and survey. But we are now getting it because now we've got Kash Patel and Don Bongino in position. They are going to get us all this stuff and there's truckload of evidence coming. But the problem is Donald Trump is at least something to do with Jeffrey Epstein. So here, we know that he featured on the flight logs like 7 times at least. Throw back to when Joe Biden released part of the Epstein files and Trump was all over them. And so that was reported in the during the Biden administration days. Just this image, someone saying, this can't be true. Please review this and tell me, whether it's true or not. Let me help you out. Someone says a simple online search will help you figure it out by yourself. Then it's up to you how to cope. I myself have no problems with my conscience because I didn't vote for a pedo. Okay, so this is the image of Trump flying, the logs that show Trump flew on Epstein's Lolita Express. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. Jet 4 times in 1993, once in 1994, once in 1995, and once in 1997. Flight logs released during Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking trial show Donald Trump travelled on Epstein's Lolita Express in one 2-leg trip in May 1994 with ex-wife Marla Maples, his then infant daughter Tiffany, and a nanny. The former president travelled on Epstein's private jet from Palm Beach, Florida to Teterboro Airport, New Jersey in March 1993, according to new documents, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so then we had Elon Musk sort of getting into power with Trump in November, properly after January the 20th, and being put in charge of Doge and then doing what he did to the government departments, gutting them, etc., etc. Then we had that spat with Trump, and then he threw his toys out the pram. And Elon Musk said this. He's since deleted it because there's been all this contretemps, but now it might be back on the cards because now we're going through Elon Musk, Donald Trump 2.0 in their reinvigorated spat. So Elon Musk said, time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. Now the question is he in the files? Well, we know he's on the plane logs, right? Or does he mean he's on a client list? Those are 2 separate things, and some people are interpreting what Musk says as him being on a client list. If he's on a client list, that's freaking massive because he's one of the people who was involved in the sex trafficking or in the consumption of the goods that Epstein was peddling, where those goods are human beings and they're girls underage. So Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. So then you go back to Pam Bondi not releasing them because of national security issues. And this matches with what Elon Musk is saying. The real reason they've not been made public is because Donald Trump is in them. Have a nice day, DJT. And he replies later, mark this post for the future. The truth will come out. Now, either Musk is lying or Musk is telling the truth. If he's telling the truth, this is massive and Trump shouldn't be the president, I would argue. So let's look a little bit further at some of these relationships. So we know that Elon Musk actually had a relationship to some degree with Jeffrey Epstein. Here is a screen grab of an email where Jeffrey Epstein back in 2016 said, Elon, were you able to meet up with Ghislaine Maxwell, Ghislaine at Kung Fu Practice on Saturday? Jeff. And Elon Musk says, I did, thank you. And that's May the 30th, 2016. So there's a relationship there. As Jim Stewartson says, 2011 to 2019, Pam Bondi was AG in Florida and didn't charge Epstein. So Pam Bondi herself was the Attorney General in Florida. And that was that time period where Jeffrey Epstein was not charged. That's interesting. 2019, Bill Barr charged Epstein, who died almost immediately. 2025, Pam Bondi said she had the Epstein list. Elon Musk said Donald Trump was on the Epstein list. Pam Bondi said there is no Epstein list. And this is what the announcement in the last 24 hours has showed us. But just before we get to what Axios and other outlets are saying, let's just have a look at the relationship of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is the leaked audio that came out that I think was the October surprise, but it actually had no effect on the election of Donald Trump in November 2024. But it should have done. In my opinion, this should have been an absolute scandal, and it kind of went by the wayside. I reported on this, but it just didn't really pick up steam. Now, this is Jeffrey Epstein talking about Donald Trump and saying that for 10 years, they were the closest of friends. If you are the closest of friends with a paedophile, surely you know, if you are the closest of friends, you have some inkling of what's going on. And remember, we've also heard Trump say, oh, he likes them on the young side. So Trump knows and knew that Jeffrey Epstein liked young girls and arguably, therefore, underage girls. And this is what Jeffrey Epstein says about Donald Trump.
Charming. He is able to convince people. So he tells everybody what they want to hear.
So how do you know this?
That was supposed to straight.
So just in case you didn't hear that, he said, how do you know this? And Jeffrey Epstein says, I was Donald's closest friend for 10 years. I was Donald's closest friend. One of the most notorious child sex traffickers, was Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years.
He has a sense of humor. He can be funny.
He's right. His ability to sell. It's very much like Clinton. Both Bill and Donald have the ability to go over to a fat, ugly woman, say, you are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So you probably know he had a scalp reduction. Because he had the same male pattern woman that we all have.
So he's talking about how Trump's had scalp reduction. He's had work on his scalp to allow him to still have hair and not male pattern baldness.
He's not a horrible human being. He does nasty things to his best friends' wives.
So this is obviously after they were closest friends. He's now saying he's a horrible human being. He does nasty things to his best friends and his best friends' wives.
Things to his best friends' wives. Anyone who first tries to gain your trust and then uses it to do bad things.
People who first try to gain his trust, he then uses them to do bad things. So this is what Jeffrey Epstein is saying about Donald Trump. That's how it goes. So they were, for 10 years, best of friends, closest of friends. What does that mean? I mean, that's surely problematic. And it fits in with the idea that he would be all over the Epstein files, which is what Elon Musk says. Then you've got Michael Wolff, the author, talking about having actually seen photos of Donald Trump in compromising situations.
Know that these pictures exist, and I can describe them. There are about a dozen of them. The ones I specifically remember is two of them with topless girls of an uncertain age sitting on Trump's lap, and then Trump standing there with a stain on the front of his pants, and 3 or 4 girls kind of bent over in laughter. They're topless too, pointing at Trump's pants.
So there you go. Okay, that's interesting. And does that, what we know so far, and I'm only just dipping the toe into what we know, but I would suggest what we know so far would lead us to be justified in thinking that Donald Trump is compromised by the Epstein files. I have no problem in thinking that, not just because I don't like Donald Trump, but it's just the data. It would be incredible if Donald Trump was the closest friend of Jeffrey Epstein by Jeffrey Epstein's own claim. And we see him on the flight logs of Jeffrey Epstein, and we've seen him ogling over girls at parties, and we hear that Michael Wolff has seen the pictures himself. He's seen at least a dozen pictures of Donald Trump in compromising positions with topless, probably underage girls. It would be, I think we would be unjustified in believing that Donald Trump was not involved in this, was not implicated in some way in the files. So then we had this. So as if that wasn't enough, we have the very famous interview. Now, bearing in mind that he's just taken $16 million because of the 60-minute CBS interview that was pared down for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris did an interview for CBS, and Trump claimed that it was edited dubiously in a way that was disingenuous. And the problem is that the owners, Paramount, want to do a merger with Skydance, and they want FFC permission in order to do that, right? And in order to get the FFC permission to merge and make stupendous amounts of money, the owner, particularly one particular owner of Paramount, has paid out Trump $16 million so that this thing doesn't go to court. And well, it's not really about going to court. It's like, if you get on the bad side of Trump, then you can't merge and make loads of money. So 16 million as an investment, essentially, paying Trump 16 million because of the edited CBS interview gets you to merge and make way more than 16 million, right? But the CBS interview of Kamala Harris was totally normal. They released a transcript. There's nothing missed out, as in there's no disingenuous activity going on. What happens is when you record an interview, you record with a person for way more than the slot you have on TV lasts. So say you've got like a half an hour slot, you will do like 50 minutes of interview, and then you've got to pare down 20 minutes. And what they did is they showed an answer to a question in the trailer to the interview, but didn't show that part of the answer in the actual interview. And then Donald Trump says, that's totally unfair. You can't do that. And it's like, yes, you can. Like, you do it all the time. Anyway, why I'm talking about that here is because this interview with Fox News, and this is a sidebar, was edited on Fox News not to include the bit where he goes, actually, no, I won't. They include his initial answer and then cut it. But this is the longer answer on Fox News that is incredibly dodgy. But if you are going to take CBS to court, then you should absolutely 100% be able to take Fox News to court and win the Fox News case, because I don't think the CBS case stands up at all.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah.
And that's where they cut it, because he said, yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I would. And then they cut it there. But in a longer version, this is what he actually says.
I guess I would. I think that less so, because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would, or at least...
Do you think that would restore trust? Help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others.
What an odd thing to say.
I didn't know you were going to be talking about this.
So he then says, well, he says yeah, and then he says, actually, no, I don't know that I would. Less so than the others. JFK and MLK, but less so about Jeffrey Epstein. You don't want to go upsetting the apple cart. Okay, so now we've got Trump saying, I probably won't release these. And in the end, they don't seem to be getting released. Okay, so then what happened in the last, that's all the lead up to the news from the last 24 hours, which is the DOJ, Department of Justice, and the FBI have concluded that Epstein had no client list. So he has no list of clients, even though he's famously been doing that for 10 years. We've got all the documentaries. We know about Prince Andrew and all these people on flight logs and people have been to his island, but he's got no client list, right? Now, I am absolutely not a conspiracy theorist, right? I very much am anti that kind of thinking when it's conspiratorial and when there's no plausibility and no probability. But here we have plausibility and probability going through the roof that something's going on and that there is something like a client list. So this is very weird. Something needs to be explained here. So what we found out, the administration is releasing a video in both raw and in... So first of all, the DOJ and the FBI have concluded that there's no evidence that the convicted sex offender and disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed powerful figures and kept a client list or was murdered. So 2 things that they had come out and said there's no evidence for, according to a memo detailing findings obtained by Axios. So the administration is releasing a video in both raw and enhanced versions that it says indicates no one entered the area of the Manhattan prison where Epstein was held the night he died in 2019. The video supports a medical examiner's finding that Epstein committed suicide, the 2-page memo claims. So, interesting one there. I think it's probably very plausible that he did indeed commit suicide. I mean, that's a less of an issue point that I have, but also I can understand why people are like, oh, something dodgy's gone on there. Okay, why it matters. The findings represent the first time Trump's administration has officially contradicted conspiracy theories about Epstein's activities and his death. Theories that had been pushed by the FBI's top 2 officials before Trump appointed them to the bureau. So that is Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. As social media influencers and activists, Kash Patel, now the FBI's director, and Dan Bongino, the deputy director, were among those in MAGA world who questioned the official version of how Epstein died. Patel and Bongino have said Epstein committed suicide, but it has become an article of faith online, especially on the right, that Epstein's crimes also implicated government officials, celebrities and business leaders, and someone killed him to conceal them. The memo says no one else involved in the Epstein case will be charged. No one else is going to be charged. So all those people, all of that, the accounts of the victims themselves and the people who have supposedly been involved, no one's going to be charged. Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, is serving a 20-year sentence for child sex trafficking and related offences. According to the memo, investigators closely examined footage of Epstein's Manhattan prison cell between 10:40 p.m. on August the 9th, 2019, when Epstein was locked in the cell, and around 6:30 a.m. the next day, when he was found unresponsive. The footage, which was reviewed by Axios but couldn't be verified independently, showed no one entering the area, the administration said. The FBI enhanced the relevant footage by increasing its contrast, balancing the colour, and improving its sharpness for greater clarity and viewability, the memo says. Investigators found no incriminating client list of Epstein's, no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals, and no evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties, the memo adds. As MAGA influencer Patel and Bongino have been among the loudest voices touting Epstein conspiracy theories, since joining the government as Trump appointees, they've been more measured in talking about the Epstein investigation and throwing cold water on the notion he was murdered. He killed himself, Bongino said on Fox News in May, and I'll show you that later. I've seen the whole file. So then in MAGA's media universe and some of its voices on Capitol Hill, they've been expressing frustration that the Trump administration's handled the Epstein case in this way since February, when the DOJ released a tranche of Epstein-related files that were already publicly available. Conservative figures panned the disclosure, saying it lacked new information. So this is phase 1, when they released a load of stuff that was not adding to the public knowledge. This is not what we or the American people asked for, and a complete disappointment. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who is a lunatic, posted then, "Get us the information we asked for." You've got a report. I don't agree with the report. I want a different report. So we have this issue about that, is that the truth that the FBI and DOJ have released? That there's nothing to see here. So then you have a collapse of the conspiracy theory thinking, particularly far right people in the information spaces. Like, what happens? You were all wrong. You were all talking nonsense. But then there are issues that I'm not part of that, but I just do not think that only Epstein and Maxwell can be implicated in what took place over a, 15, almost 20-year time period. It just doesn't wash with me. So I think there is more to come out here. Now, when Elon Musk had a falling out with Trump last month, Musk accused the president of being in the Epstein files. Trump posted on Truth Social a statement from former Epstein lawyer David Stern saying Trump wasn't implicated in any crime. Stern had also represented Trump in his first impeachment trial. Musk later deleted the accusation and other posts on X saying he went too far. Still, the questions about whether Trump's name is in the government's Epstein files have persisted because they had been acquaintances who attended the same parties in the 90s. And in a 2017 interview with author Michael Wolff, Epstein had claimed that at one point he was Donald Trump's closest friend, and that was that audio from earlier. Trump, however, said in 2019 he was not a fan of Epstein and hadn't spoken to him for 15 years. He also said he had barred Epstein from his golf resorts in the early 2000s. Democrats, meanwhile, have demanded to know more about the Epstein-Trump relationship. So now we've got people on the left going, right, there's something about this. So it's switched from being a right-wing conspiracy. Now they're kind of embarrassed that stuff hasn't come out and that maybe their own people are implicated. So then you've got the left going, what's going on here? But then you have people on the right also going, well, something is being hidden by the government, and it's kind of this anti-establishment position where, you know, you are against the political elites, and now Dan Bongino and Kash Patel have become the political elites. And so there's that dimension too. So what's next? The DOJ and the FBI say in a memo that no further disclosure of Epstein-related material would be appropriate or warranted. So that's the end of it. It's done. That's the end. Nothing to see here. The memo says much of the material relates to child sexual abuse, details of Epstein's victims, and information that would expose innocent individuals to allegations of wrongdoing. Through this review, we found no basis to revisit the disclosure of those materials and will not permit the release of child pornography, the memo says. Okay. So then let's go to one of the instances recently. This goes back to May, where Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are saying, no, it was suicide. And it was after this interview that their own supporters went nuts, because this, you know, you've just been telling us for years that the FBI are covering stuff up, right? And now you get in and now you're saying the FBI was originally right. So either you are wrong or you were lying to us previously. And that makes our heads explode.
You know what, Maria? Kash is not kidding. We've been personally briefed extensively on every single detail, nugget, tendril of this case. One is actively in court right now, so out of respect for the case, it's probably more appropriate that I stay quiet on that. However, I'm not going to tell people what they want to hear. I'm going to tell you the truth, and whether you like it or not is up to you. If there was a big explosive there, right? Given my history as a Secret Service agent and my personal friendship as a director does with the president, give me one logical, sensible reason we would not have. If you can think of one, there isn't. There in some of these cases, the there you're looking for is not there. And I know people, I get it. I understand. It's not there. If it was there, we would have told you.
And that's where, at the very least, he should be doing some massive apologies. He should be apologising profusely, because he's just spent years saying there was a there. He spent years whipping up these information spaces into a frenzy. He then gets into the position where he can confirm what he has been spouting, and he denies it completely. Something is wrong here. Either these guys and the news outlets that had supported such controversial claims were lying and were wrong, or they are continuing to cover it up. So what we have are all sorts of memes like this coming out. We will release the Epstein list. We just need more time. So this is the idea that had a truckload of evidence, and we just need more time to go through all these videos and all this stuff and all the things that we got from SDNY and so on and so forth. So we just need more time. Then turned into the Epstein list is on my desk. So Pam Bondi said, and we're going to go to the Fox News snippets where she said this. These are on my desk. I'll be reviewing them. The client list is on my desk. 2, there is no Epstein client list. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, if there is no client list, right, if this wasn't about blackmailing the rich and famous, then the rich and famous appear to have been either involved in this and are getting away with it scot-free, or the rich and famous weren't involved in this, and this was just a massive bit of kind of not quite sex trafficking, but sexual impropriety and illegality from Maxwell and Epstein themselves, and only them. Come to our parties, get involved. Come to our parties, but don't get involved in what just Ghislaine and myself are going to do. Weirdly, in these rooms, you guys stay out there, enjoy your your cocktails and mojitos. We'll just do some dodgy stuff and then we'll come join you for some drinks later. Or you're all involved in this. And if you're involved in this, then there should be implication for these people. And then the question is, well, if you are involved in this, are we holding imagery of you guys implicated in this as leverage against you? So this person says no clients means there's no blackmail and you're just doing it for the love of the game. I mean, it sounds horrible, but the idea is that from today's or the last 24 hours declarations from the memo, this is just something that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were doing for the love of the game, just themselves. And of course, that doesn't make sense. So let's go back to Pam Bondi. Here she is some time back.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right.
So the list is, she answered, the DOJ may be releasing the list of the clients. Now, the memo says that there is no client list. She says literally to Fox News, she has that list sitting on her desk. And this is going back to whenever it was previously.
The DOJ may be releasing
February.
the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, we'll check back with.
So that could be interpreted in several ways. I haven't seen anything yet that's oh my gosh. So if you had a client list, that client list surely just has a bunch of names that you'd be, oh my gosh, like surely. So that could be interpreted in all sorts of different ways. Then we have this, and I'm going to play all of this to you.
We all did. And the FBI handed over a couple hundred pages of documents. But, you know, Sean, I gave them a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything. And a source had told me where the documents were being kept. Southern District of New York, shock. So we got them all by, hopefully all of them, Friday at 8 a.m. Thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Cash is also, now that we have Cash here, it's a game changer, of course, and Cash is going to, Director Patel is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents.
Okay, I want to be clear because I think...
And now the FBI is apparently going to withhold all of those documents again and not produce a client list. So Cash Patel is continuing to do the thing that she is criticizing the FBI previously for doing. None of this seems to add up.
I think people got frustrated because they were expecting more. You were expecting more, and you didn't find out less than 24 hours before the release. You got a whistleblower that confirmed that there were way more documents that they were supposed to turn over, and then you found out just before that.
Well, sure. And you're looking at these documents going, these aren't all the Epstein files. You know, there were flight logs, there were names and victims' names. And we're going, where's the rest of the stuff? And that's what the FBI had turned over to us. And so a source said, whoa, all this evidence is sitting in the Southern District of New York. Yeah. So based on that, I gave them the deadline, Friday at 8, a truckload of evidence arrived. It's now in the possession of the FBI. Cash is going to get me and himself, really, a detailed report as to why all these documents and evidence had been withheld. And, you know, we're going to go through it as fast as we can, but go through it very cautiously to protect all the victims of Epstein, because there are a lot of victims.
Well, you had identified in phase one over 254.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, is that the only...
So if there are 254 victims, if there's no client list, those are 254 victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell alone. I guess it's possible, but you know, you're thinking, well, those victims won't be, that would be a conservative estimate of the victims. There'll undoubtedly be many people who haven't come forward that they don't know about. So that's at least 254, but only Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein are involved in activities with them.
thing that would be redacted? Will everything else be made public that you get in your possession?
Yeah, the FBI hasn't had, obviously, they haven't looked at the thousands of pages of documents that they've just received Friday.
Yeah.
But Cash has a team going through them, and it's always about protecting the victim. But you know what? We believe in transparency, and America has the right to know. The Biden administration sat on these documents. No one did anything with them. And why were they sitting in the Southern District of New York?
We're all about transparency. Biden sat on these documents. That was 8 weeks ago. We want to be fully transparent. 8 weeks later, we're going to sit on these documents and we're not going to produce them.
A full report on that. You know, sadly, these people don't believe in transparency.
Nor do you.
But I think more, unfortunately, I think a lot of them don't believe in honesty. And it's a new day. It's a new administration. And everything's going to come out to the public. The public has a right to know. Americans have a right to know.
And
I think that should come out and bite her on the arse.
And that goes the same with the JFK files, RFK files,
Martin
MLK.
Luther King. Yep, absolutely.
What are the things that, and maybe some people don't understand the need to redact. In the case of a victim, that should be pretty obvious to people. What are the other things that maybe you would have to redact?
Well,
national security?
No, of course, national security, some grand jury information, which is always going to be confidential. But we'll see. Let's look through them as fast as we can, get it out to the American people, because the American people have a right to know, not only on that, but on.
And I wonder what Sean Hannity was doing there, so priming her to be able to have some elbow room, maybe. So you can redact on national security? Yeah, of course, national security. Okay, well, who would that entail? Like, what people would you not be happy to talk about, to implicate in this, even though they've done wrongdoing? But you can't talk about their wrongdoing because it would cause a national security issue. And I would assume she'd be happy to implicate anyone who's been in government and is no longer in government, right? So, you know, for example, if Biden or Clinton or, I'm not saying they were, but like anyone from the Democrats, from Obama, any previous administration officials, yeah, I'm sure there'd be fair game. So it seems like Sean Hannity here is just giving her or giving the FBI and the DOJ some wriggle room just in case things really do implicate people in the Trump administration. National security.
Kennedy, on Martin Luther King, on all of these cases that the Biden administration has just sat on for all these years. So yeah, it's really, it's not sad. It's infuriating that these people thought that they could sit on this information, but they can't. It's a
either she needs to apologize for saying stuff like this about the Biden administration, or she needs to release what she's talking about. Like, she's either massively wrong about the Biden administration, or she's doing exactly what the Biden administration did for spurious reasons. Like, there isn't a middle ground there. It's incredibly disingenuous.
New day, and we believe in transparency, and it's going to come out. And when we redact things, Sean, what we're going to do is not just pull pages out like they used to do. If something's redacted, you will know the line, and you will know why it's redacted, like a victim's name, identifying information of a victim.
They're not even going to do that. They just don't appear to be releasing anything. So let's go back to Kash Patel here.
Again, logical play out. If there was a video of some guy or gal committing felonies on an island, and I'm in charge, don't you think you'd see it?
Tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn, and there are hundreds of victims, and no one victim will ever get released. It's just the volume, and that's what they're going through right now. The FBI is diligently going.
Again.
So in March, Bondi says the FBI has tens of thousands of these videos. April, Patel says they have vanished. July, the DOJ says there's no client list, no names, suicide, case closed. So somebody here saying they had the tapes, now they have amnesia. Or they need to apologize for all the stuff they were previously saying. Bondi, 3 months ago, the Epstein client list is on my desk. Bondi, today, the Epstein client list doesn't exist. Do you get it yet, MAGA? Bondi says Epstein client list sitting on the desk right now and it's reviewing JFK, MLK files, and yet now, today, not so much. Carl Kulinski from Secular Talk says, at this point, I'm convinced not only is Trump in the Epstein files, he was Epstein's #1 client or his best friend, as Epstein literally said. So what you're now going to get is conspiracy theories coming from the left. And I'm left just all over the shop on this, thinking, well, something is amiss. Something is amiss. And when you've seen so many of these images of Epstein and Trump together, you are left thinking that the national security issue probably is Donald Trump. Good news, MAGA. It turns out that the list they told you was definitely real and they had on the desk is actually not real. It must have been a mirage created by that Democrat weather machine. Photos attached for no reason of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein get along solidly. And then you have the right-wing reaction now, which is fascinating because there's going to be cognitive dissonance going on where you have a core belief and then you have evidence against that core belief, and those two things can't coexist. So what happens? What gives? Usually your core belief maintains. But here, I mean, there are all sorts of variables and all sorts of things floating around. People like, in this case, Cat Turd's Head, who is one of these prominent Musk MAGA types. So all the girls who have testified being raped on Epstein's island were lying, and Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for being the madam for nobody? Please tell us this is fake news. No client list. So this is all about nothing. And that, Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan have paid out all of this just on account of Jeffrey Epstein himself. Well, yeah, possibly, but it goes no further. Charlie Kirk, remember, was saying the Epstein files phase 1. It's happening. So all of these right-wing influencers were so full of it when they got given those files initially during phase 1. Here is Joe Posobiec getting one. And now others saying, can we frame this for a museum now? Because it turns out that there was nothing. And these people have been spouting all of their conspiracy theories about the Epstein files for so long. But again, my position is there is something, but it's probably uncomfortable for these guys. So they either need to apologize for lying to their audiences for years or apologize for continuing to cover up these files in the name of national security and Donald Trump. So here, Jack Posobiec, or Jack Pozo as his handle is, just got an Epstein binder. And that's a picture just behind of when that happened. And then just yesterday says, I want answers on Epstein, as many as possible, not press releases, answers. So he's like, he received a file, but of course it didn't give us anything new. And now he's like, I'm not happy. There's got to be more answers. And I would, to some degree, agree with him. So we went from Bondi has them on her desk to Bondi putting out these right-wing influencers with Epstein phase 1 binder, nothing burgers, to the FBI kept them from Bondi, to there's 15 gigabytes of evidence now, it's coming out soon, don't worry, to there is no client list. That is what has happened in a nutshell. Is that, do we feel that that's everything we need to know? Do we feel that the DOJ and the FBI really can be justified in drawing a line in the sand? There's nothing else to see here. And again, the same kind of right-wing influences could be the biggest troll. So originally, he said, where is the Epstein info on the American people were promised? You handed us a notebook that and promised more was on the way. You told us it existed, and now you say it doesn't. America deserves answers. Sorry, that is just yesterday. But of course, when you go back a month, it could be the biggest troll in history to make Democrats demand both the Epstein files and spending cuts. We may be watching pure genius unfold in front of our eyes. When it's convenient, it's pure genius. Just that's cognitive dissonance there. Those two views, just like we saw with Jack Posobiec as well. Just something's not aligning for them because their previous beliefs and the situation now are totally at odds. Either the FBI were previously right and there is nothing to see here and that's why they didn't release stuff, or there are people implicated, and it could well be that there are people implicated on both sides of the political spectrum, and that's why two administrations have not released all the data and there's been no further action. It could be that the royal family from Britain is also heavily involved, and there could be pressure from over the pond, from the British. Keir Starmer went over when people were thinking the files were going to be released, and met with Trump in the White House, and Prince Andrew's been on tenterhooks, and then suddenly nothing to see here. So is there an implication there for the British royal family? I don't know. I don't want to throw around wild accusations, but when you see the interview on, you go and watch the film Scoop, which I think is on Netflix, about Emily Maitlis now working with the news agents, used to be BBC Newsnight, when she interviewed Prince Andrew, it was excruciatingly painful. He's clearly implicated in some way. There must be, I'd imagine that if, worst case scenario, there are all sorts of people implicated, and these people are super powerful, and all of those sorts of people are going to be putting pressure on and have their own, they might have their own leverage of people over people in power to make sure that nothing happens. Or it was weirdly just Maxwell and Epstein. No one else involved. Nothing to see here. And that's what the DOJ and the FBI appear to be saying. Nothing to see here. Only those two involved. Job done. We don't want to talk about it anymore. There are lots of victims involved, so we'd rather just keep it quiet for their benefit, and so on and so forth. I don't know. Let me know what you think, guys. I personally I would personally speculate that Donald Trump is at least somewhat implicated in these, and Elon Musk wasn't just making stuff up. And when you look at all the other data points, it looks like it could well be a case that Donald Trump and others are implicated, maybe from across the political spectrum, maybe from across nations, in this situation. And it could just be too explosive, or certainly too problematic for the Trump administration to publish what they may well know. Anyway, let me know what you think. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.